For the first time in over 100,000 years, the Lizardfolk have begun to reclaim and repurpose the legacy left behind for them by the first Lizardfolk Empire. Though Catalacia, the final empire, is far from its final potential. Though 2 spires have led to the colonization of the planets Romutha and Agredant, several spires remain missing, broken, or under the control of those who have usurped them. The spire in Shalazar still lies in the hands of the genies. The one in Serenbor is under the control of the Aeordand Ruinborn, and we have yet to discover where the one in the Shadow Swamp currently lies. Not to mention those we own which are still either broken or underwater or need to be excavated. And so in today's part, the final part of the final empire, we seek to restore all of the spires and discover what planets lay behind them. Though not explicitly on the things we have to do, we will also be invading and consolidating as much territory as possible, just to make things look nice. You know, I did have that one agenda to humiliate the command, and suddenly it disappeared. And I think that's because they're kinda going through something, which is a huge blessing for me because I really didn't want to fight the command, but at the very least, I was prepared to do it in the middle of this civil war. Fortunately, I guess we don't have to, at least not right now, since of course the command is no longer a valid rival for us. We do need to own every Lizardfolk province in the world, which isn't too hard considering, you know, we are like the only Lizardfolk empire. But there is one province that we still need to take, so we're going to do that real quick. As mentioned, the spire is still under the control of Aeordand, and although this is going to be logistically annoying as hell, we are going to have to take the spire. Obviously, I'm going to use the claim because there's no way I'm going to try and actually invade Aeordand. Okay, turns out we actually can't core this, it's too far away, but I have a solution. Through the power of even more violence, we can probably core something here. In fact, I know we can because it's within our colonial range. And then, once that's done, we should be able to core that stuff. I'll just clean up the borders a little bit while I'm here, but that should be good for this war. Surely this will give me enough coring range. Huh. Now, I did turn on Great Conquerors, and that does spawn in some Witch Kings. But I didn't expect the Merfolk Witch King. Yeah, that is... wow. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm paying that. That's cool. There we go. With our new colony, we can actually take this stuff. Might as well take as far as I can just to extend my range. Now, the spire is back in our control. We found it on an island so deep in the middle of the ocean that no maps catalog its existence. The elves call it Serenbor, a bridge to the stars, for that is what the elves and the Lizardfolk were working together to build. A great spire that could take them beyond the heavens. Yet, clearly it wasn't finished. We need to know why. We need to know the truth. 10,000 years ago, the elves of Elantir overthrew their draconic masters. 2,000 years ago, they encountered our ancestors and struck up a friendship over a mutual hatred of dragons and desire to share research. We were friends, allies. We worked together to understand the mysteries of Halan. How did Damestir work? What was the purpose of the spires in Sarhal? What was the astral terror? The elves knew they wanted to reach beyond the sky itself, but whatever was up there was preventing them. They needed another way, and we both believed the answer lay in the spires. The half-built spire on Serenbor was a symbol of this cooperation, or so our archaeologists have been able to gather. While unsuccessful at restarting the spires in Sarhal, the two sides agreed to work together to construct their own spire using what knowledge they had gathered from Kazakash. It was a symbol to our friendship, a mutual desire to understand the world and allow both peoples to thrive. But something went wrong. There does not appear to have been a clear event. The answers remain scattered and unfocused. Some records blame Lizardfolk for being uncomfortable building a mimic of what was granted to us by the gods. Other records blamed a mysterious being called the wishcatcher, although what it did was unclear. Others simply spoke of not wanting to share the skies with, quote, lesser beings. The resulting war was known as the usurpation of the Golden Scales. The war was one of extermination. They cast aside our friendship and the 271st Empire, the greatest Lizardfolk empire since the first, was destroyed. Never trust an elf. We get minus 10% morale damage received for the rest of the game. We unlock a new question for the Thraxis, and we increase our faith in the prophecy. We have another bogus empire, the 121st, which supposedly ended the exact same instant that it began. But for the sake of the prophecy, of course, it must be included. We'll just lose a little bit of faith. The Thraxis has returned once again, and we have a new question to ask it. How long did our war with the precursor elves last?
The Lizardfolk have fought with many people. It can be difficult for us to tell when one war ends and another begins.
The tension, which had been high before the question, dissipated quickly as it seemed instead the Lizardfolk would get a typically rambly answer from the Thraxis. That is, until it spoke again.
But they were different. It did not stop. They developed, we can scarcely call them weapons, tools of extermination.
We don't understand what happened.
For before that, the two sides were friendly.
We did not see it all.
But we dared not test what they could kill.
The crowd was deathly silent. This was not a tone anyone had ever heard the Thraxis use before. The voices it spoke with usually echoed around each other in a disconcerting cacophony, but this time each voice spoke as one in a deafening tone.
We are unsure if we have a beginning. Before meeting those elves, we believed we also did not have an end. After seeing what they did, though, we changed our mind. If anything could end eternity, it would have been them. You have seen the evidence in what they did in England here. All we can say about that is that it was almost much worse.
Okay, I have a new theory. I think the elves made nukes. I think they made something kind of like nukes, and the fallout is probably why the Lizardfolk are able to mutate so rapidly. That's my new theory. It might be wrong, but that's what I choose to believe. For the next 20 years, we get minus 25% war score cost versus other religions. Conveniently, I'm actually just about to use that against Pinghoi, because we do have to take more stuff. Now, yes, Laurent is going to join this war. That doesn't really matter, though. With the aquatic war against the Witch King in full swing, merfolk interactions have grown increasingly desperate. Deadly battles overrun by terrifying creatures, devastated merfolk cities, and rampant ecological destruction have ruined a generation of merfolk, and yet the war continues to grow. The coalition rests squarely on Catalacia and our continued backing, yet can we afford to throw resources into a floundering cause? Well, of course. Another 10,000 crowns for the merfolk. Frenzied messages arrive from the sea, each denoting a coming battle. Then, silence. A day of dreaded, unnerving silence. As sweat collected on our brow, an arcane message broke the tension. A second, dozens followed, weeping, emotional, and fatigued. They imparted one word: victory. We joined the tides in sighing with relief. Though it will be an arduous rebuilding process for the merfolk, they have not shunned from giving thanks to Catalacia. Piece by piece, our merfolk allies delivered shares of the spoils taken from the remaining coalition funds and the Witch King's treasury. Ashen skies, that was close. We don't quite get everything that we invested into this war, I don't think so at least. But the merfolk see us in an overwhelmingly better favor, and I'd rather get at least something back. We have the opportunity to pick any of the hegemons that I like, and I think I'll go with the military one. I spent a whole bunch of money to make that happen. Now, I don't actually need to keep all of the troops that I hired to make that happen, and I probably won't because it's kind of expensive. Just a small 1,000 crowns per month just to maintain that. It did take a while for Pinghoi to fully surrender, but we are going to take everything from them, including a couple of islands from Laurent. All of our troops are now in position to finish this mission off. Upon entering the temple in Hellas, we were able to deduce immediately that 1, it was built by the precursor elves, and 2, it appeared to be keeping the great lizard spirit locked away. Clearly, the elves must have feared the lizard as it reminded them of us. But there are no elves to stop us now. The culture in both the Lupulan rainforest and Arakellan areas become Hishakaya lizardfolk, and they all gain +1 base tax. Additionally, we will be able to converse with Lupulan. So we actually do have to interact with some of the Hellas content. We have to complete at least 3 of the quests, and we have this little quest menu. We have all 5 here. We can complete At least one of them? Yeah, we're gonna have to do a lot more than I expected. It seems we do have to take everything in the Lupulan rainforest, so we'll start invading these guys. We have more dubious empire claims. Between the 300th and 305th empires, we might have just had a migratory tribe that proclaimed the new empire every time it moved, so we do lose faith in the prophecy again. At the same time, we'll also start this war just because these two are allied. Okay, I will finally embrace the institution. I think it's reasonable for us to be a nation of mages and artificers, just because, of course, the priestly ruling class are also powerful mages. It makes sense thematically. And I'm going to pick up that admin tech just a little bit ahead of time, I guess. Of course, that's going to be the religious group. Of course, I like taking the Brillites. Hopefully this has nothing to do with the mission tree. I know sometimes it does, but we'll see. It is quite a bit of overextension. Oh well. We can finish off one quest just by sitting in a province. We have a statue of a malevolent spirit that was confined by Lupulan, so if we guard the statue, Lupulan will surely be pleased. Alrighty, now that we've threatened war for the last province in the area, we should be able to finish off, I think, 2 more of these. I could take an Oath of Nature, make construction cost 50% more expensive, and then the last one is we will conserve the wildlife within this region over here in this little area. It will be a nature reserve. They will lose all development and buildings. They will be forbidden from being developed, and the province of Brenulan will produce dames tier with a hefty production bonus. Now, we've completed 3 of these, so in theory we can appease Lupulan. The great lizard spirit towered over the rainforest, each leg as tall as a Zatsaria. Its giant teal-colored body glowed and illuminated the procession of lizard folk below. It had originally not taken kindly to our presence. Although pleased to have been freed from the grasps of the temple, it viewed our actions here as unhelpful to solving the rampant spirit madness that had overtaken the continent since the start of the rending of the realms. It refused to answer any questions about historical lizardfolk empires until we had helped it. Now though, after granting its wishes, our entourage returned to the colossal spirit with the same question again. Were there lizardfolk empires in Hellas? Lizardfolk did live here before. The spirit spoke in a deep rumbling voice, speaking in the language of the natives of the rainforest. I don't know if they were an empire. That was none of my concern. Good enough for us. We increase our faith in the prophecy. The Oath of Nature is removed from us. Perfect, so we don't actually have to increase our construction cost or tech cost. Every tropical or jungle province will gain an additional building slot, and if this is your first appeasement, it will gain 2 additional building slots. The event in Ethereal Offer happens in 5 days. Should we accept, we will acquire a new racial military, the Spirit Military. Those are quite the buffs, but I don't think it's the most natural choice for the lizard folk. Our interest in the spirits kind of starts and ends with Lupulan, only because he can tell us stuff about the old lizard folk empires. Anything other than that with the spirits, and we don't really care too much. So I think we are going to refuse. Now, get ready for some lore dumping, because that coincided with another mission that I finished, and those combined will bring us through the next, 8 of them, I think. First, Beyond the Storm Wall. While in the past we may have been reluctant to admit the precursor elves had reached levels completely beyond our capabilities, the final empire does not have such insecurities. For the precursor empire collapsed with no hope of ever reforming, while our own is eternal. Their destruction of the 271st Empire is just a part of history now. We will reach their level, it is simply a matter of time. It is why we can look at their creations and marvel at the sheer scale of their ingenuity. We have scoured Aelintir for as much elven knowledge as we can, but with the dropping of the Storm Wall, yet newer lands have appeared with a cornucopia of potential precursor relics waiting to be unearthed. We know of this land's name from the records across precursor archives. On Sarenbor, in the Pillar of Heavens, they speak of these lands where incredible experiments were run, manufacturing life, creating beasts of war. Insia. Yeah, so basically, Insia's not ready yet. Insia's just not really been fully fleshed out. It is coming, eventually, at some point. That's this whole continent that's locked behind this weirdly oval shape that surrounds it. So, of course, we would have more story stuff in Insia, but we do not. Instead, we get Incia is very cool, with -1% prestige decay for the rest of the game. As the Empire continues to grow, we need to expand our administration alongside it. We can no longer just rule the whole Empire from the capital. We will send more Naga to the regions of Daonako and Favanosi to help local officials and rulers manage affairs. If this model proves successful, we can replicate it for our overseas and interplanetary colonies. The culture in Favanosi and Daonako will change to their respective lizard folk types, and up to 30 provinces in both regions will get 1 manpower and 1 tax. Although, curiously, it doesn't seem like either of those things actually just happened. Well, anyway, the discoveries on the planets of Agredant and Romutha are astonishing. Ores and metals found rarely on Halan are abundant on Romutha. Agredant is littered with old precursor elven artifacts and knowledge. Our engineers have been salivating over what we can do with these materials in near unlimited abundance. What has perplexed our researchers the most, though, is the presence of lizard folk on these other planets, or, in the case of Agredant, lizard folk ruins. They must date back to the First Empire, for that is when the spires were built. But what of all these other spires? Do they all go to other planets? Was Halan the origin point of all interstellar travel? Or was Halan not the original? Something before the First Empire, something not of Halan. That is the same question I think I asked in the second part, since we seem to have a lot of spires on this particular planet, but not a lot on the other ones. We'll have to find out by repairing the spires in Gamyi, Ashuzal, and Kuvunica. We also get -30% construction cost for the rest of the game. Now, the idea that this spire is cursed is starting to fade away, especially since the Gasabi lizard folk are able to enter the spire with no problems, so we might as well activate it and see what's on the other side. We can now repair the spire, and we increase our faith in the prophecy. Deep in the being of every lizard folk lie the memories of every lizard folk before them. Somewhere, locked deep inside the structure that makes up their being, is the key to every mutation that ever existed. We need to examine as many lizard folk from every corner of our empire, know all of Halan, to see if we can unlock the secrets of old mutations. Maybe somewhere deep inside all of us lies the secret to this mysterious wishcatcher. All of our estates except for the artificers get +1 max privilege for the rest of the game. We can now have unlimited mutations, and every active mutation now grants us an additional 25 governing capacity. Strap in, this is a bit of a long one. We have found the spire in the Shadow Swamp. Obviously, we knew that there was once more Zatsaria. They can be damaged, after all, and have stood for tens of thousands of years. But what became of those other spires? For the most part, we understood them as being completely destroyed, and their component parts carted off to different parts of the continent. In some cases, they were swallowed by earth and lava, as was the case for the one destroyed during the 223rd Empire. Being buried by lava, though, is one thing. Lava could probably melt even a Zatsaria. Swamp water, though? Surely no Zatsaria could be destroyed by that. We already have an example of a spire remaining perfectly preserved after being swallowed by the earth. Kazakesh, the spire on the Genie coast, worked just fine. After extensive expeditions, the Shadow Spire was uncovered. In the end, not by any prospector, but by a simple Chokin farmer. In Tovhichasu, the tip of a spire is visible, fading in and out of sight. It appears to exist between two planes at once, although its connection to the shadow plane is fading. Pulling it out of the earth will be the most difficult task, but once we do, there will be no greater sign of lizardfolk control over the Shadow Swamp than resurrecting a great Zatsaria at its center. I wonder what planet this one leads to. We're now able to repair it, and we can increase our faith in the prophecy, giving us 100 of each point, and we will unlock a new question for the Thraxus. Never before has a new lizardfolk's hatching attracted such attention. We done it. This hatchling was a being so powerful it once scared even the precursors and the genies. For the first time in almost 10,000 years, they had returned, a wishcatcher. It will be granted to the Nagas, which will give us -50% shock damage received and 20% more expensive stability, and we will get another event in a year. Now, we'll repair this spire real quick. It's going to take around 2 years, it seems. The Thraxus has returned, and we do actually have a question for it. What are the lizardfolk ruins on other planets?
How delightful. We are so glad to hear you have reunited with your brethren.
There was an excited murmur around the crowd. So they are indeed lizard folk like us then, said the lizard who was tasked with the noble duty of speaking with the Thraxis. When did our ancestors leave this world and establish new homes on other planets? Was this the first empire? The Thraxis paused, spinning in place for a while.
We don't leave this planet. That which lives in the sky would not allow us to, and we do not wish to venture into one of those lovely spires of yours. This planet you speak of may have been visited by your kind before you even reached this world.
There was a short pause, but this one was interrupted by the crowd, who almost in unison started shouting new questions. Even the head speaker, tasked with both containing the crowd and conversing with the Thraxis, had temporarily lost her composure. Eventually, a Naga hushed the crowd with a spark of magic lightning shot into the air, a violent crack. In the stunned silence, the Naga in question broke protocol and spoke. Are you telling us that lizard folk do not come from this world?
You do not know?
Asked the Thraxis, prompting another outburst from the crowd and another crack of lightning from the Naga.
We would have mentioned it sooner if we had realized.
The Thraxis seemed to realize that this statement had riled up the crowd because its next words were spoken in a much softer tone, as soft as any tone spoken by a million voices could be, at least.
Your kind has a word. Do you still use it? We find it to be a lovely descriptive word. The word for home. But also the feeling of belonging. This may not be your original home world, but that does not make this land not your home. You do not need to have been born here. You have made this land your home, and it will remain yours for as long as you live here. It will also remain part of each of you who does leave this world. Think of it like the many mutations your kind undergoes. Each mutation becomes part of your people. Each dead mutation remains part of your people. You are of this planet, and every planet of Lizardfolk is part of you.
You are all you are, and all you have been is part of you. We're aliens, and this causes quite a stir. For the next 10 years, we will get +2 national unrest. But that is the last question we can ask the Thraxis. In a meeting to decide what next to ask the Thraxis, one Naga suggested asking about the 12th Empire, about how accurate our histories of the period are. The Naga in question, who hailed from Shanyza, had maintained an almost century-long argument with another Naga from Zerat about the true nature of this empire. Nobody else present had even the slightest interest, but the seniority of said Naga meant the idea was submitted to be discussed as an option. Only when the subject could be evaded no longer did the Emperor say what the rest of the group had been thinking. Nobody really cared about the 333 empires anymore. We have gone beyond the stars. We have questioned the very nature of the universe. We have learned how to control our own mutations, picked fights with genies, outlasted the precursors. We have lived on other planets. The only people who still brought up debates were those holding grudges over slights and insults. The bickering over whether the 12th or the 130th or the 158th or any empire really existed feels so petty and meaningless when we live amongst the stars. For the final time, we increase faith in the prophecy, and all future faith in the prophecy events have the option to ignore their negative effects by responding, "Who cares anymore? We're in space." Absolutely based. Now here's the fight with the genies that last mission referenced. The Genie Palace stood unchanged from when we last broached its entrance deep in the plane of Earth. The Zatsaria at its middle stood, gleaming and sparkling as vibrantly as the last time we saw it. The first pair of genies spotted did not even speak, but merely waved a hand in the general direction of our army and continued their conversation. But nothing happened. The army continued to march. The air shimmered, sparks shot from a genie's hand and swirled above the army, before coalescing into a single stream and pouring down into the open mouth of a single wide-frilled lizard. The genie did not move. He was frozen in place through nothing but abject terror. The last thing he could do before being riddled with musket fire was scream. A wishcatcher. Within 3 hours, the entire palace had been occupied. The spire could be returned to its rightful place in Shanyza. The being that so terrified both elves and genies had returned. No mutation could ever be wiped out again. For now, we knew they could always be brought back. Every mutation is eternal. Our empire is eternal. Now we can build our colony in this province. We have touched down on our third planet. This was not a welcoming land. Lizard folk are typically ill-suited for icy weather, and as soon as the blinding light of the Zatsaria subsided, snow was billowing in through the open door. However, upon leaving the spire, the air felt warm despite the snow. First contact with the native lizard folk went much better than some of our previous meetings with natives. Of course, we can now build the colony at this location, and we can find another Zatsaria to open up. The official name we'd given to the planet was Zilkanes, named after the many volcanoes that appeared to dot the landscape. Perhaps there were distant lands of rain and jungles like our beloved Tanayas, but as far as our early expeditions could tell, it was a frozen hellhole broken up by under-earth heating that melted the ice and made the land habitable. Now, one of the issues we're having in Zilkanes is that nobody really wants to live there. It's just cold all the time, and if we try to bring materials with us, those little fiery cats tend to set them on fire by accident. Although there is a particular kind of lizard folk, the Ashana, who for some reason seem to do just fine. We eventually learned that the natives of Zilkanes managed to figure out a way to create a boat that would melt the ice around it in its path, after which the ice would refreeze in its wake. Since they require dames tier, it's not very easy to create these on Zilkanes, but we have plenty of dames tier, considering our colonies on other planets. We get another mutation for the merchant guild, giving us plus 20% improved relations, minus 25% envoy travel time, minus 10% fire damage received, and of course 25 governing capacity. We also get the Kuika Gamyi colony, giving us 3% missionary strength and plus 1 tolerance of the true faith, and of course we release Zilkanes as our subject. That is the third space colony, allowing us to finish this mission off. Life on the planetary colonies can be harsh. Crop failure is a common occurrence, and a lot of food has to be transported to the colonies to keep them afloat. Endless open lands available for those seeking a new life sound exciting until you realize how unforgiving attempting to eke out an existence on these alien worlds can be. The colonies would have failed if not for one secret trick of the lizard folk species, the Chokin. It adapts to any environment seamlessly. Its attitude to life does not change no matter whether the Halani sun shines bright or the black ring of Romwitha hovers ominously above. To be compared to a Chokin was once considered the greatest of insults. It meant you were stupid, ignorant, gormless, and slow. On the colonies, however, to be compared to a Chokin, well, it still usually is meant as an insult, but for some it is about resilience, about the ability to adapt to any surroundings. It represents what it truly means to be a citizen of Catalashia. It doesn't matter where in the world, no, the galaxy you are, you will adapt. You will survive and you will thrive. Our colonies, including future space colonies, will receive 100 yearly tax income, 50,000 manpower increase, and 40 land force limit. We have all these mutations complete. New ones have been appearing across every space colony. There are now lizard folk on Romwitha capable of drinking the black oil on that planet and breathing fire using it as fuel. Others on Agradant have developed legs similar to that of a cricket, allowing them to jump astonishing distances. Attempts to integrate all of these mutations into our military have not gone well. Tanaya's commanders have little experience with them and find it difficult to incorporate such a variety of lizard folk into battle plans. We would be better off granting more autonomy to the colonies in matters of military organization. They know how to use these mutations and get the best out of them during warfare. Our space colonies receive 10% siege ability and movement speed. We have a few options for our next colony. I guess I'll go with these guys. I could technically do any of the colonies in any order, but I'm pretty sure there's one we want to save for last, just for thematic purposes. And in the meantime, while I wait for those colonies to be created, because we're going to have to wait a while, I'm just going to go ahead and invade some random countries. Not because we really need more power. We have pretty much infinite money and as much manpower as I think I'll ever use. Sometimes you gotta do it for the love of the game. It appears this Zatsaria leads to a moon, although not the moon of Halan. This moon, it seems, was visited by the precursor elves and also substantially altered by their presence. Precursor structures litter the landscape both on the surface and in the many vast caverns underneath. The only evidence that lizard folk were even here was the Zatsaria. I think it's also time for us to fight the most annoying and by far least productive war of this entire series. But I do want this stuff that's owned by Salaran. and we only have one choice to get all of it at once. Further exploring this precursor moon has uncovered two major discoveries. One, just how much Damestier there is here, and thus probably why the precursors came here, and two, just how inhospitable it is. It's cold all the time, and there's dust everywhere, not to mention the earthquakes. But there may be hope. Some of the precursor records imply that they had ways of controlling the climate that lessened the chill and cleared the air of dust. If we can reactivate those machines, maybe we too could plunder the riches of this moon. We were able to reactivate the precursor technology using a combination of coal and Damestier as fuel. Within a week, the dust had dropped significantly and the caverns had become significantly warmer. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more livable than it had been previously. We get 20 artificer capacity for the rest of the game, and Damestier is now produced in Metat Tagokag. We knew there was Damestier here. We'd found the odd collections stored in containers across Tanglios, previously mined by the precursors. But it wasn't until we got the old mining equipment restarted that we realized just how much there might be. Reactivating the mining operation was not easy. Leave the comfort of the main cavern where all the old machines had been reactivated, and the toxic sparkling dust returned. The only lizard folk who seemed unaffected by its impact were those with the rare Gasabi mutation, which raised more questions about the true nature of that mutation, the old cursed spire, and the nature of the shadow swamp that will no doubt confound scholars for centuries. But none of that mattered, for once the first Damestier vein was found, all worries were swept away. This entire moon had Damestier veins as large as a Zatsaria. There was maybe more Damestier in a single vein here than existed in the entirety of Sarhal. Of course, we release Metat Tagokag as the Tanglios colony, and we receive 10% movement speed for the rest of the game. Oh yeah, I don't think I really mentioned I am doing a couple of extra wars in the background. Just gonna fully annex this guy. Alright, that's looking a lot better. Not perfect, we still have to take some stuff from Necklif, but we'll do that later. We've stepped foot on yet another planet, this one not being too dissimilar from Tanaios, being very hot and humid. It's no surprise then that a lot of the ruins we've been finding are of old lizardfolk societies, and many of the lizardfolk who made the initial journey are already looking to set up a new home. This new planet was similar to Tanaios not only in its climate, but that the lizardfolk who lived here built their cities around the spires, and each city was torn down and built anew several times over the course of thousands of years. In one such city, we discovered a building that resembled the inside of a Zatsaria, except that the number of wheels and cranks and buttons numbered in the several hundreds. The scale was extraordinary and may take centuries to figure out what it did. Fortunately, our empire has eternity to figure things out. Out of all the strange creatures on this new planet, the strangest of all was a Chokin, one which we had not brought with us but instead seemed to be a native of this planet, which raises all sorts of new questions. We already know lizardfolk aren't from Halan, so does this confirm that Chokins too are also not from Halan? Perhaps this is their homeworld, or maybe they were brought here by the lizardfolk like those on Halan. And the most important question of all, does it taste just as good? Our space colonies get 200 yearly tax income, plus 100,000 manpower, and 80 force limit. Now, Ketherata we will simply full annex. In the previously mentioned building with hundreds of levers and buttons on the walls, a young laborer accidentally slipped and pulled a hidden lever. Hundreds of lights and little doodads lit up across the room, each leading to a different doorway. Our research indicates that each one of these doorways likely leads to a different planet, in which case the lizardfolk must have settled hundreds or even thousands of them, and all of them led back to here, this planet and this hub. Atop the central hub was the one word we were able to immediately translate. This indicates that we have found the original planet of the lizardfolk. We gain 333,000 splendor. We get the Rach colony until the end of the game, giving us +1 tolerance of the true faith. The Odu Karas region also gets 10% local goods produced, and we release Rach as a subject. Since we were told that we're not from this planet, obviously this is not the center of the entire First Empire, but I also didn't expect to find it so soon. In any case, we should be able to activate more spires. Not really much to do while we wait for that stuff to be done. I guess we could do another little war with the Empire of Anbennar. Stepping out of the Zatsaria onto this new world, we find little else than an island. The one island that the Zatsaria stood atop And other than that, just a whole lot of water. We might have to return with a boat. While we wait for the war score for that one to tick up, we'll do imperialism against these guys. We returned to the watery planet, and it took some time to disassemble and reassemble each ship as we sent it through the Zansaria, but the first boats on Shakatan were ready to set sail. Transports set out in every direction, told to return within a month if they could find no land. This continued throughout the year. By the end, only one crew had found anything above sea level, and that was an island even smaller than the one we stood on. But what we had witnessed beneath the waves made discussions of land less relevant. The ocean floor was teeming with life. The water here acted differently to what we were used to on Halan. You didn't experience the same pressures going deep underwater, and light was able to travel much deeper than it could normally. That barely mattered though, for the seafloor was awash with lights from plants and fish, and even structures clearly built by sentient life. Although nobody had spotted any signs of settlements like the merfolk settlements back home. At night, the sea shone as brightly as the stars above it. But it was what the last ship had spotted that made the rest wary to head out again. As deep as you could see in the water, even that had its limits, and eventually you entered the open ocean, the endless depths. It was there that the crew spotted something enormous. It was bigger than a Zatsaria, bigger than the island they arrived on. It was swimming deep underwater, entire ecosystems of lights dotting its back. It turned, and the tip of a fin, larger than a mountain, reached the waves. Our scout ship almost capsized in the resulting tumult. After that, it dove down out of sight. We're going to need bigger boats. Go ahead and take this from Necklif. On the water world of Shagatan, we've encountered more lizard folk, ones which had a lot more aquatic adaptations and said they lived in giant bubble cities underwater. Even our most aquatic lizard folk can only hold their breath for about 10 to 15 minutes, so our new friends promised to return with bubbles, they said. They did indeed return with a bubble, a mode of transportation we assumed they developed specifically to welcome our diplomats to their cities. Their towns and villages were indeed covered in giant bubbles, and out of all the gifts they granted to our diplomats, the weirdest one was a gift of 50-something aquatic lizard folk. They didn't seem forced into this journey, yet we're not entirely sure what they're intended to be. In any case, we did bring them back home, granting us the Kuvunica colony. We also get the Glids mutation, giving us 15% infantry combat ability for our marines. We also get 25% ship trade power, and of course 25 governing capacity at the cost of 20% additional shipbuilding time. Now, the question of how to reactivate the Spire of Ars kits has been a tricky subject for a while. It could be possible to haul it from the bottom of the ocean onto land, but dislodging it from the sea floor would be difficult without sending divers down to dig it up. And the merfolk would never allow us to do that. A full-scale extermination of merfolk was not an option either, and fistfights had started when it was brought up in one meeting. Fortunately, we may have found our solution. Shagatan lizardfolk are more than happy spending their entire lives underwater. Even lizardfolk with Tanias parents, if their eggs are hatched on Shagatan, are born with the Glids mutation that allows them to spend hours, even days, underwater. They can repair the Zatsaria. This will allow us to repair the Arskit's spire, which is, I think, our second last spire. I think the only other one is in here. There we go. I was waiting to see which conquest would actually make my name big. Just had to get rid of the ugly little blob in the middle. Upon arriving on this new planet, Zangea, we found ourselves in the midst of a conflict we couldn't have possibly known was going on. It's not surprising that we should find at least one lizardfolk society that's a little more advanced. Not more advanced than we are, mind you, but those that have created large walled cities and kingdoms of their own. Kingdoms which were in the midst of a war. And while some consider us a bad omen and want us to peacefully leave and never come back, the princess of the kingdom which we have stumbled upon has instead asked us for help, and that may very well be the first step to exerting our influence. To help them, we're going to send 100,000 soldiers and 100 transports. While we fight that war, I think I'd like to fight this one. We were successful in winning the war, and not only that, but this letter entails certain details which we wouldn't make any sense of, since of course we weren't there. But TLDR, we likely saved those people from 1,000 years of darkness. and our soldiers are heroes whose names will be sung forevermore. For the rest of the game, wait, hold on, is that no army tradition decay after this? Hold on. Yeah, that would completely negate our decay. Okay, cool. So we no longer lose army tradition from decay. I think it's probably a fine idea if we simultaneously pull this move real quick. Much of Zangea still lies in ruin after our victory, severely damaged and depopulated. Considering many of our own soldiers who fought on Zangea are preferring to stay there and build new lives, we were able to set up an agreement that some of the depopulated lands will be handed permanently over to the Halani Lizardfolk. There is little left to move into, but thousands of natives wanted to support our people who had saved them during the Great War. The lands will be made suitable for habitation once again. Our veterans will have their new home. We have a big celebration on Zangea. The first Halani Lizardfolk to step foot on the soil of Zangea is now king of a new realm that was granted to the people of Halan. Generally, everyone's having a great time. We get 100 prestige that converts into monarch power, 100 splendor, we get +1 diplo rep, and we get 5% morale of navies along with a second diplo rep. Then, of course, we gain our new subject. Okay, we've more or less finished conquering Sarhal, and this leaves us with just one spire left. There is one second last mission. Just had to wait to finish all of those agendas because that's a lot. Our priestly class, the Naga, have been integrated into every aspect of running Catalassia. And yet, these days, they feel like their control has been slipping through their fingers. Trying to guide the lives of the space colonies from Thanaeus feels impossible. So it follows, of course, that every one of our space colonies must have a permanent Naga headquarters. No more special envoys. We cannot fear that a spacefaring Naga's interpretation of Anzalkatsa may drift from those on Halan, for the interpretations of Anzalkatsa doctrine will shift an infinite amount of times in the infinite time of the final empire. So each one of our space colonies gets plus 100% national manpower modifier and plus 30 land force limit. Here we are. The Achenka humans have called this thicket where the spire was uncovered Atamumba. They fear it and have legends about whisking away those who dare enter the area. The name has stuck amongst the lizardfolk here, despite attempts by the Naga to rename it to something easier to pronounce for their own population. As the spire flashed and its lights lit up the swamp, those inside the spire spooked each other with ghostly stories of what scary creatures they may find on the other side. What would we find on Atamumba? Stepping out of the spire, we appeared to be in the middle of a large field of a generally arid landscape. There were clear signs of agriculture at work, and even a few lizard folk spotted working amongst the rows of scraggly-looking trees. Our people. By now, we had a full procedure for first contact. Look large but unthreatening. Hand out gifts to the natives while showing open palms to show you are not armed. Use a large and brightly colored language book to speak with them. These natives, though, were different. They had strange shards of pink scales growing at awkward angles out of their scales, and growing yellowy green eyes that gave no clue as to what they were thinking. Their gazes moved as one of our welcoming party tried to communicate, but not one responded, nor even looked at the gifts we presented. After various failed attempts to get any reaction, our diplomatic envoys gave up and walked back to the crew outside the spire, who had been examining the local plants and rocks. Then there was a clicking noise, a rhythmic tapping, like that of a woodpecker, but from each of the yellow-eyed lizardfolk. As one, each of them began to step forward, raising their right arms. One loud click, and out from their arms blasted forth a barrage of sharp-tipped spikes. Every lizard of the welcoming party dropped, glowing yellow spikes piercing their bodies. A second volley, and a second wave of lizardfolk collapsed, clutching at the shards embedded in their chests. By the time the third volley was loosed, one member had finally started spinning up the crank, and with it, the few surviving members saw the sparkling lights and re-emerged into the strangely reassuring darkness of the shadow swamp. Yeah, something's a little off about these lizardfolk, eh? Okay, we have a new disaster. Progress is always 1.5 each month. It's actually going to take a really long time. I was kind of hoping it would be faster than that, but okay. A full battalion of only the most elite in our military had jammed themselves into the Zatsaria in the Shadow Swamp to prepare for a return visit. But the crank would not work. Multiple engineers, scientists, and various experts all tried to work out what was happening. Perhaps something had gone wrong. Perhaps one of the many strange gears and magical doodads that inhabited this incredible spire had broken. In truth, although we had activated multiple of these spires now, we did not really understand the machinery behind them. There were books on what happened if you moved certain gears to certain places, but it obeyed a logic nobody truly understood, and operated under magical laws to which nobody had cracked the code. So the soldiers were forced to leave while the engineers tried to trial and error their way back to operation. One gear moved here, but to no effect. Another one turned a mysterious crank no previous spire engineer had dared touch in other spires, but that too accomplished nothing. Another junior engineer grabbed a lever and flipped it upwards. Clicking, sparks, voices, chunks of flesh on stone, more clicking. The spire had not activated. There were no sparkling lights of the 1,000 stars on its face. But something had gone very wrong. Nothing was leaving the spire. Nothing, that is, but the ceaseless sounds of clicking. A large army had gathered around Tovjiesu, armed with the finest weapons Katalashia could equip them. The clicking from the spire could be heard from a distance, but if anything had left the structure, there were no sign of them between the murky branches of the Shadow Swamp. Although it also had to be said, the Shadow Swamp was a much more beautiful place than when it was inhabited solely by trolls. Flowers bloomed on the trees, monkeys darted between the branches, while Chokin wandered aimlessly between the pools of water. I might move here after I finished serving. A soldier tossed small stones idly into a pool. He and his friend both trying to get the closest to hitting the soul lily pad floating in the center. I feel like I'll never change if I don't move from Kugra. His friend nodded and tossed a stone of his own, narrowly missing the lily pad. I know what you mean. It's like, you know, being a lizardfolk. He gestured around aimlessly. He was never great with words. It's like we're not meant to never change, you get me? I get you. He hurled another stone towards the lily pad, missing by a wide margin and startling a nearby frog. It's why we look so different from our parents. It's why mutations exist. We're meant to change. He hurled another stone, finally landing right in the middle of the lily pad. Nice throw. Clicking. Every direction. Louder and louder and relentless. Flashes of pink and yellow, screams and wild blind musket fire, catching nothing but bark and air. The echoes of the gunfire faded. The screams faded. Only the clicking remained. That's a lot of manpower to lose from this event. Okay. Panic begins to spread. Although the initial failure of the Spire expedition had not spread quickly due to the few survivors, one could not hide the sudden disappearance of a large number of soldiers. Families wanted to know where their sons had gone. Who were they fighting? Why had they not heard from their relatives living in the Shadow Swamp? Rumors were starting to spread. Someone had struck a deal with the Night Hags to bring them back. The Naga had found evidence of another empire and were trying to hide it. A dragon had awoken in the swamp and was devouring all who approached it. But we can't let them know what's really happening. The spires have ceased working. Spinning the crank does nothing. Nobody has heard from people on the planetary colonies in over a week. Teleportations usually happen every hour, but the stars have stopped shining on the spires. Instead, when one turns the crank, all you can hear is clicking. 3 stability for that. Nice. The hive mind has finally arrived. For the first time in over a year, the light on the Zatsaria glowed. Not with the brightness of the stars, but with an ominous yellow. They didn't sparkle like the night sky, but pulsed ominously like a heartbeat. And the clicking, ceaseless clicking, growing louder and louder and louder, until out from each spire poured thousands of lizardfolk. They moved in unison, each movement matching each other, each one's gaze following the others. They would raise their hands and fire their spiky growths in unison. They would scuttle forward and take defensive positions in unison, and they would click in unison, always clicking. It never stopped. The entire swamp clicked and clicked and clicked. So Atamumba gets 50% increased morale damage. That's crazy. Okay, but what exactly is what's going on? Take back every spire before returning to the hive mind's planet. Oh boy. You know, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't realize just how much worse it got the more spires you had. At least I didn't repair all of them, so there's still one here that's actually, I could repair it, but I think it's good that we did not. So in theory, what is it, like 3 per spire, I think? So first of all, actually, the Navy's gonna move here and find them to that spire. Then I'm gonna move these guys into position. I don't need to narrate all this, I'm just gonna, yeah. Okay, and of course, Day 2, they declare war on us. That makes sense. That's a lot worse than I thought it was. That's a little different than I expected. Although, I mean, like, honestly, this is really not that bad. I think it's only not that bad because I have an utterly insane amount of manpower. Like, if I didn't have that manpower, things would be a lot worse. So we're gonna do two things. First, I'm actually gonna take this, because I assume they all have my tech, right? Yeah, they all have tech 25. So I might as well actually upgrade all of my units and not fight yet. Then we will go to the mages. I'm actually going to apply a broad ward, although I don't expect that it's actually going to be used that much. But you can never be too careful. Yeah, look at that. They get 117% siege ability. So that actually is very necessary. The first and easiest spire to take down is going to be Arskits, simply because they will have no retreat. I don't care if it's overkill, I'm just going to swarm this spire. We have succeeded in beating back the Arskits spire. The craziest part is that it's not even overkill. We lost 70,000 troops in that battle. But fortunately we can stack wipe them, and that will be the next Zatsaria.
Are we really the final empire? What felled the 332nd Empire? It was an invasion from the Shadow Swamp by Lizardfolk who they could not communicate nor reason with. When the hulking Ashana burst out of the swamp and slaughtered all in their path, the Empire was split in two and never recovered. When the 24th Empire collapsed, it was when some invading force arrived through the Zatsaria. Records differ on what beings burst forth, although some did say they resembled Lizardfolk. Does this mean the 24th Empire was real? No. Not because their story doesn't make sense, but because do we really think it was the 24th Empire? Do we think the last empire was the 332nd? What we are going through is just another empire collapse, like both the 24th and the 332nd, or whatever numbers they truly were. We thought we were different. We thought we had counted correctly. What fools we were. It's happening again. We lose faith in the prophecy. Also, yeah, they just added another 200,000 troops to each spire. This might be a little harder than I thought it would be. I really just thought it would be the initial 180,000 or so. This is a lot worse. That is almost 4 million troops. Oh, man. We are managing to pull off some pretty impressive stack wipes. Not all is lost. And the first spire to fall is Arskits. That'll free up these troops we can use to take the next spire. I can allow some of the spires to siege a little bit, so long as it allows me to take others. Honestly, I think the best tactic is just overwhelming force with every spire. After all, they have to siege, we only need to push them back. Did any school warn against this? Did any school of thought proclaim that perhaps it was a bad idea to dredge a cursed spire from the Shadow Swamp, then foolishly activate it just to take a look, to see what's there, to tamper with worlds we had never gone before? No Naga warned of this. Nobody told us about the clicking. It won't stop. Make the clicking stop. We lose more faith in the prophecy. And we change our doctrine to follow Sculptors of Fate, but humiliated. So we lose 7.5% morale of armies. Fortunately, we do still have our Romutha moths, meaning we can still barrage these forts and get a whole bunch of siege ability. The siege of Shalazar is over. We're just about to stack wipe them. The siege of Romutha also is over. Listening to the hive mind. When the lone Gasabi at court started to scream, Churnit the First shuddered. With everything that had happened since the venture onto that cursed planet, it was not hard to wonder if the doom that cursed mutation had long been feared to bring had finally arrived. The shock quickly faded though, along with any fear it sparked. Faded and was replaced by fascination, for it was not panic or terror driving the black-scaled lizardman to scream. It was not even clear he had a choice in the matter at all. After all, the scream was made up of words, strange words spoken in a rush, punctuated by even louder screams, but words all the same.
Same, same, same. We are glorious same. We are spore yellow and green flesh and bone white, and one and all are same. We fight, we war, we will, all will be yellow, green, black, all will be us, all will be same.
At this point, the poor Gasabi's voice gave out. Some advisors are quick to assure the Emperor that it must have been some strange manifestation of their curse, but Katalashia knows better. He has fought those clicking creatures on the battlefield. We have won, and more often we have lost, but we have never had a chance to truly know their foe until the glimpse we got today. And if 1,000 years proved anything, what we know, we can understand. And what we understand, with the Gasabi's help, we can kill. We remove they won't stop clicking from the hive mind, meaning they no longer deal 50% additional morale damage,
and each of the colonies, including the hive mind, received 10% more fire damage. Honestly, I kind of felt like I was doing just fine without it, I'm not gonna lie. The Tashira versus the hive mind.
No designation, riverine advance. Water, the dissonants are in the water, the rivers, the lakes, each looks the same. We are same, but they are not. They are storm, and they are wave, and they crash. We cannot follow, cannot find them, cannot spear them like fish. We are strong, we are solid. We are one like the earth, or we swim like a stone, and the dissonant know this. They strike and they melt away, and water can melt down a mountain, and water can fall through our claws, and water diffracts spore site, deflects bone launcher. It destroys. It destroys. How do we survive a spore in the sea? A yellow island in the endless wet, dark, so alone, so apart. They know, and we do not.
The Tashira lead another amphibious assault, and the psychic song shatters. I have no idea what any of this means. Here we go. We get sailor recovery speed, ship trade power, governing capacity, minus 10% manpower recovery speed, and the hive mind gets 50% land attrition and minus 25% movement speed. It also strengthens our armies in the fight against the hive mind. Okay, I think I will take that. Gamyi has now fallen, leaving us with 2 spires. Well, technically 3, but this one is well on its way. Just the one in the west, and then of course we have the one here. And then, I guess technically, the hive mind itself. They know. Another event from the perspective of the hive mind.
Dissonant. Why are they so dissonant? Each one, every one, different eyes, different claws, different scales, different everything. They do not move as one. They do not breathe as one. They do not look as one. Voices are not same. They hear us. We hear them. Get out, get out, get out. Send more spores, send more, send more.
The Gasabi slumps to the ground while attendants rush to him. Shivering under a blanket, the black-scaled lizardfolk looked up at the Emperor. They think as one. It's one thought, screaming in their heads endlessly. I think they attacked us because when we entered their world, our voice was different. I don't know why they chased us here, though. It's like they can't stand the idea that something that thinks would think differently, or look different, or do anything that isn't
the same.
The Gasabi grabbed at his own mouth in an attempt to slam it shut. He took a few deep breaths, then lowered his hands again. There's a central hub through which all thoughts seem to pass through, a spore hive or something of that sort. If you can get back through that spire, I will be able to lead you to it. I don't know what you can do then, though. Use explosives? That sounds good. So initially I thought these guys were robotic hive mind. Apparently they're not, and also they spawned more troops. At least this time it's only 50,000. The Boaga versus the hive mind. No designation, priority bodies. At this point, the hive mind is having a generational crash out. Our Boaga infiltrators are massive naga that are boa-like and aggressive, allowing them to constrict and swallow a fully grown Ashana whole. So we're using these as essentially scouts and disruptors. They are quite literally just eating the enemy, and eventually devoured the node bearer. I assume that's like one of the cortices of this hive mind, responsible for a particular task in the field. Anyway, the hive mind now loses 10 yearly army tradition and minus 20% reinforced speed. The Glids versus the hive mind. The Glids are helping us fight the hive mind by glitzing all over the place. Hell yeah. The hive mind gets minus 100% ship durability, minus 10% landfire damage. Okay. The Kathashala are perhaps one of the more interesting mutations. The one with the newly grown third eye, one with the ability to sense magic power and their surroundings, communicate telepathically, read and control minds, extend their lifespan, and even fuse their soul with the third eye, turning it into a pearl-like crystal that retains their consciousness after death. Naturally, they're able to disrupt the hive mind's communication. The hive mind loses 10% discipline. And with the fall of this spire over here, we've been able to free up quite a lot of troops to start combating their spread in the north, and we're focusing this last spire before entering the Shadow Swamp. It has taken a drastic shift in tactics, throwing the rulebook out the window and doing whatever crazy ideas come to mind using whatever lizardfolk happen to be in the force at the time. But it's finally happening. The hive mind cannot handle whenever we do something different, whenever they are forced to fight a different type of lizardfolk with a different sort of mutation from the last fight. They lose their composure and freeze in place. Their anger is palpable and it gives us strength. The lizardfolk of Tanayas and beyond are starting to believe. For Katalashia, we gain 1.1 million manpower and we get 15% morale damage for the rest of this disaster. We can throw on another mutation, the Shanyza. That actually gives us 4 defense. I should have put that on a long time ago. Anyway, it also reduces their infantry fire by 0.5. That's pretty substantial, actually. My total infantry fire is 1.6, so that's a lot. The hive mind has finally realized that we're starting to breach the inner part of the Shadow Swamp. We're starting to bring some troops back. We've finally reached the final Zatsaria. The enemy still numbers over 1 million, but at this point their fighting capability is pretty negligible, and the spire has fallen. And my game is crashing. Okay, the war of extermination is over. The invasion force was small, as many had expected the spire to simply spit out another 1,000 of the spiked lizardfolk. About 100 soldiers, including the Gasabi who could tap into the hive mind, and a large haul of explosives brought from Hellas were all packed into the bottom floor. This time was different. The spire did not glow yellow nor begin clicking, but instead flashed with the reassuring white twinkle of the stars. One blinding flash later, in the dusty plains and empty fields of Atamumba could be seen out the door of the Zatsaria.
Stop, 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 stop. They do not stop. They bring fire to drown us, kill us, silence us. Drown, drown in fire. Stop. They move, they...
Head towards that mountain. The center is located in a...
They know. They can hear us. They bring fire. Stop them. Stop.
Half the team stayed behind to guard the spire, while the other half hauled the explosives in a cart towards the distant hill. It took about 25 hours to reach the mountain, although the sun never set. It seemed days were longer on this planet. They met little resistance along the way, in part because any time one tried to get close, the Gasabi would start speaking as the hive mind, and the alien lizard's position would be given away immediately. Once the team found the hub from which all this terror was being disseminated, it was almost anticlimactic. It was just an unremarkable rock, large to be sure, buried into the earth. There were only 3 signs it was anything unnatural. First was that it glowed faintly yellow. Second was that if one stood too close to it, one could make out thousands of small clicking sounds. The final sign was that once the team had started laying the explosives around the rock, the Gasabi started screaming.
No, no, they bring fire. They burn, kill, destroy, kill. Stop them now. They're different. A dissonant voice, one voice, us. We stop. Stop. They hear us. They will end. No, it will end all over. No, I can't stop us. Us, we are same.
Boom. We regain our faith in the prophecy. Our doctrine is restored to Victorious, and we get a colony on Atamumba. It was originally thought nobody would dare try to live on Atamumba. The hive mind was still not fully understood, and some theorized that simply staying on the planet might infect the inhabitants again. For a nation as large as Catalassia, however, barely 0.01% of the population need be mad enough to brave the unknown, to attempt settling on a planet that might infect your mind, for their numbers to be enough for a full colony. It's how the other space colonies got started, after all. For those who did make the journey, they were richly rewarded. The many fields the hive mind had plowed were easy to commandeer and adapt. The homes were very bare and simple, but were sturdy and easy to move into once you removed the few bodies from the corners of the rooms. Sometimes one of the hive mind lizardfolk would wander into the town barely alive. Some would simply stand in place and scream. Others would just curl up in their old house, gnawing at their arms. Others would try to attack, although their attempts were erratic and generally ineffectual. Some were different, though. One walked up to the Zatsaria, brandishing a piece of cloth with an incredible drawing of the spire on it, its 1,000 stars depicted in a fashion that seemed to glint at night. Another started mimicking our settlers by helping out in the fields, bringing in the grain, copying our speech, sleeping in a bed left out for it. It was often left a wide berth, but during an early harvest celebration, it joined in with the dancing. Even in Tannius, there were reports of a group of them who had built their own boat on the Tressic Isles and sold fish at the local market, fish they had caught themselves. While they faced heavy ostracization, especially across Tannius, which had been borne the brunt of the damage during the hive mind invasion, the other colonies had not seen fighting and were more willing to accept these strange yellow-scaled lizardfolk. It helped that their ability to fire the shards from their bodies made them excellent at defending the colonies from whatever other space monsters were out there. Is this safe? We get the Tovchiasu colony, giving us +1 tolerance of the true faith for the rest of the game. We also get Azasats, which will give us 0.5 infantry fire and minus 10% morale damage received at the cost of 10% increased idea cost. And with that, the Empire has defeated its last threat and is truly eternal. We found it, Rach, our home, our original home. Not just that, but we found what could be the key to unlock not just a few new locations to explore, but the entire galaxy. We found the home of the first empire. Although at this point, even counting empires would be odd, trivial even. There are hundreds of worlds out there. Some of them will have had races like that of the precursor elves who traveled across the stars like our own forebears did. Many of these planets will too have lizardfolk. Many of them too will have seen the rise and fall of empires. Maybe some of them too reached where we did. They too believed they were the ultimate empire. They too reached Rach. They too found home. All of these empires too fell. The elves, the lizardfolk, the distant species who conquered entire worlds we may never know about. We cling to our idea of the eternal empire, like we won't be like every other species across the galaxy. Yet, what can we cling to, if not the prophecy? Why do lizardfolk have so many mutations? It's for survival. Not every mutation will prove useful in the moment, but many more will. If we all looked the same, we would all die the same. This is how we lizardfolk keep coming back from the brink over and over again. There is always a mutation that emerges suited to the situation we find ourselves in. This is why the lizardfolk before us established themselves on so many different planets. It was for survival. Should something happen to the intergalactic transportation system, they knew they would have spread their people out to so many locations that some would still survive. One strain, one mutation could revive the Empire. That way, the Empire would never die. That way, the lizardfolk would never die. We say there have been 333 lizardfolk empires on our planet of Halan. We don't need to cling to that idea anymore. For now we know we are still part of that original galactic empire. They know one of their kind would make it back to this spot and rebuild what was broken. We are not the 333rd empire. We are the first empire, the Eternal Empire. Our country name changes to the Eternal Empire, and we gain a very powerful modifier for the rest of the game. That's 20% morale of armies, plus 10 tolerance of the true faith, 20% admin efficiency, plus 2 yearly absolutism, and plus 50 maximum absolutism. Presumably that replaces our faith in the prophecy though. Yeah, that seems to be the case. There you have it, the Eternal Empire. Absolute cinema, 10 out of 10, would recommend. That was incredible. It's a little different from most of the character-centric mission trees that I've showcased on the channel. I would struggle to think of any major characters in this plot other than, obviously, you have the first, I don't remember his name, Sykar Riverclaw? I think that's his name. Obviously, you have him and you have his brother at the start, but once that's resolved, it kind of moves into this overarching plot about, you know, the Eternal Empire and space, the origin of the lizardfolk and all that stuff. But that's still very interesting. It is one of my favorite sorts of storytelling genres, to tell the tale of like an entire country over a large span of time. I guess that's kind of why we play these games, in a sense. That's sort of like the whole EU4 thing, actually. All the Paradox games, except I guess Crusader Kings, kind of do this. Anyway, I'm rambling at the end of an already very long video that concludes a very long series. So if you've gotten this far, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope the series lived up to your standards, and if you have any ideas about how we could restructure the way I read out these events, because I feel like it's making the video super long, then go ahead and leave a comment down below. Also, if there are any countries you want me to take a look at, I may or may not do that based on your suggestions. So it's probably worthwhile leaving one anyway, especially now that I might do a couple of shorter runs in Anbennar, just while we wait for EU5 to release, of course. But anyway, if you want to leave a like on this video, that would be super appreciated. I'm just going to assume most of you at this point are subscribed. We're like 5 hours deep into this series, so I should hope so. But for now, this is Corbett, signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day. As always, a big thank you to the patrons for this month. All these people get early access to videos, so I'd like to give a special thank you to those who decide to donate more. So thank you, Erica, Baby Cal, Born to Dunk, Gallo4, Lukebecker, Mikhail Sample, Nick Steffel, Princess Rhea, Cubrute, Spyro, Tillman Augustin, AG Forero, Ben Mottram, Quiet Guy, Rosset, Torvald, Ambient Cyan, Elysia Tutz, James Levy, Luke78776, Stalin DLRP, and Robert.